I used to think Clint was the strongest man I had ever met, until I saw them type the word female into his file. That sentence, quoted from the secret audio tapes Burt Reynolds left behind in the final months of his life, made anyone who ever believed in Hollywood's myth of masculinity fall silent. The man who stood 6'4", with shoulders like stone walls and a voice that rumbled like thunder rolling off the Rockies, the man America celebrated as the embodiment of the true cowboy, had once been turned into a punchline inside rooms the public would never see. On the tape, Burt reveals a chain of shocking truths. An internal studio file that deliberately misgendered Clint Walker, an underground war of resentment with Warner Bros., and the shame Burt carried for half a century for staying silent. There are things I can't take to the grave. So why? Did Burt Reynolds only dare to speak the truth at the very end of his life? We have to begin where every secret was finally unlocked, his final recording. Before they smeared him with a piece of paper, they tried to break him with a contract. Burt Reynolds' voice on his final recording sinks low, as if he were reading out a verdict he once watched helplessly unfold. Clint was considered a rebel star, before the term rebel star even existed. In the 1950s, Clint Walker was pure gold for Warner Bros., a star the studio wanted to control from his breathing to every hour he worked. Cheyenne topped every rating chart, turning Clint into an American icon. But behind the spotlight was a battle the audience never saw. A principled actor facing off against a giant entertainment empire. Clint believed his salary was far below the value he brought. The shooting schedules exhausted him, and the contract bound him like chains. And he refused to sign, refused to stay quiet, refused to behave. Burt recalls that in one closed-door meeting, Clint stood up, looked straight at the Warner Bros. Executives, and said, "I don't sell my soul to anyone. If I'm going to work, it has to be fair." The room went cold. Hollywood wasn't used to actors talking back, and Clint didn't just talk back, he stopped working for nearly 2 years. The entire studio staggered, broadcast schedules fell apart, productions froze, and millions evaporated each month. Clint had triggered a bomb the studio system era had never seen, and like every empire that has been challenged, Hollywood retaliated brutally. Warner Bros. Froze Clint completely. No new roles, no new contracts. Directors whispered behind his back, "He's difficult. Too stubborn. Acts like Cheyenne in real life." An invisible label was stamped on him. Troublemaker. From then on, Clint became a target, and a target only needs the right moment to be taken down. Burt pauses for a beat on the tape, then speaks as if releasing an old ghost. They hated him not because he was wrong, but because he wouldn't bow. And then he whispers the line that opens the door to the next dark chapter, a chapter Burt never spoke of publicly. The weapon came as a single piece of paper. One line, 2 words, female. Studios didn't just control Clint with contracts. They controlled him by turning him into a target. Burt Reynolds says this on the tape with a steady voice. No rise, no drama. And that calmness makes each word fall like a slab of stone. He recalls a night he never forgot, even at the end of his life, a night that led him down into the basement of Warner Bros.' administrative wing, a place with no glamour, no red carpet, only the smell of old paper and metal file cabinets heavy as coffins, holding records Hollywood never wanted the public to know existed. The manager said gently, "So, you can understand how the studio operates." But Burt immediately understood it wasn't an invitation. It was a warning. And just as he suspected, among stacks of dry clinical reports, he saw a name that made his hand go cold. Walker, Norman Eugene. Burt opened the file, and the first lines said everything. No mention of talent. No mention of the millions who tuned in to Cheyenne every week. Instead, there were phrases more dangerous than any scandal in the studio era. Non-compliant with PR. Refuses arranged dates. Declines contract extension. Retains independent legal counsel. And the phrase Burt repeats again and again, excessive independence. Too independent. Independent enough to be a threat. Honest enough to be considered hostile. In the studio system, that wasn't a virtue. It was a declaration of war. Clint didn't curse anyone, didn't stage rebellions, but his integrity shattered the unspoken rule. The studio is the father. The actor is the child. Burt says that in that meeting, no one discussed Clint's contributions, and no one mentioned the loyalty of the audience. They discussed only one thing: controlling public perception. Everyone in the room knew what that meant. One man, in a monotone voice as if reading an invoice, said the sentence Burt carried like a scar. "We can't fire him, but we can make it hard for him to stand." Another replied softly, almost casually, "If he won't behave, then make people stop seeing him as an icon." At the time, Burt didn't understand what they meant, but he remembered the feeling that something cruel was about to begin. And then it happened, with one typewriter click, one internal joke, one line that seemed harmless, and a dark chapter Hollywood never admitted to was born. In the gender field of Clint Walker's file, someone typed, "female." No one single word. But in the meeting room, it triggered a wave of laughter, not because it was funny, but because it gave them the intoxicating feeling of striking at Hollywood's greatest masculine symbol. "That girl plays Cheyenne pretty well," someone quipped, and the room roared as if they'd thrown the first stone at Clint's monument. Burt did not laugh. On the tape, he says, "I looked at that word and knew immediately. They had found their weapon." Because rumors in Hollywood don't need newspapers. They don't need proof. They don't need anyone to claim them. They only need a smile to get started. And just as Burt describes, the rumor didn't explode like a bomb. It spread like smoke, slow, sticky. No one admits they said it, but everyone repeats it. It slithered through the makeup rooms, drifted backstage, surfaced in whispered exchanges between assistants. "You know, Clint's a little unusual," followed by giggles. The word female wasn't a joke. It was a message from the system. Anyone who defies the studio will have their image distorted. And for a man America saw as the embodiment of masculinity, doubt was the bullet aimed straight at his honor. No scandal needed, no press coverage required, just enough uncertainty about who Clint really was, and the icon would crumble. Burt pauses for a few seconds on the tape, a long silence, tight as a wire stretched over a lifetime, before delivering the sentence that chills the listener. The day they labeled Clint female was the day they decided he would never stand straight again. To Clint, it wasn't a mistake, not a joke. It was a sentence. And to Burt, it was the first time he saw clearly that Hollywood did not operate on truth. It operated on stories chosen specifically to break someone. But the thing that haunted Burt most wasn't the laughter in the meeting room. It was the moment Clint first heard the rumor and the way he stood still, like a silent mountain being eroded by the wind without ever crying out. Burt recalls that it happened on a gray afternoon at Warner Ranch. Clint had just finished shooting a horseback scene, leather costume still dusty, sweat dotting his forehead, when a young lighting assistant rushed over and whispered into his ear the very thing the entire studio had been laughing about behind his back. Burt stood a few meters away and saw Clint's face change, not flushed with anger, but paling, like a man suddenly handed a sentence he never earned and could never defend himself against. Clint didn't speak. He only asked one question, voice low, slow, and catching for a moment. Why would they say that? No one answered, because the real answer, if spoken aloud, was too cruel, to teach everyone else to obey. Burt says Clint turned away, walked toward a props truck, opened the door, and sat in the driver's seat like a man who had aged 10 years in a single breath. No smashing things, no shouting, no blaming. Clint's silence weighed down the entire set, as if everyone suddenly realized the thin line between being a star and being a puppet of the system. But the system didn't stop. The rumor slipped out of the trailers, off the lot, and seeped into the bars of Burbank and Beverly Hills. Tabloid writers smelled bait and began scribbling poisonous insinuations. Clint's beauty is too perfect for a real man. Insiders claim Walker has a gender secret. No one made a direct accusation, but every line planted suspicion. And for a cowboy icon, suspicion alone was enough to crack the monument. The worst part, Burt says, is that Clint tried to pretend he wasn't bothered. He kept working, kept writing, kept smiling when fans asked for autographs. But in the eyes of that Wyoming man, there was a sadness no one fully grasped. The sadness of someone humiliated by something he never did. Burt remembers once walking into the makeup trailer and seeing Clint sitting alone, staring at his rough hands, whispering almost to himself, "What did I do wrong, besides telling the truth?" That question followed Burt for the rest of his life. He says Clint belongs to a generation of men who believed in honor, not honor in magazines, but honor in the mirror every morning. And when that honor is stained by a malicious joke, there is no way to wash it off except to endure it in silence. The studio tried to bend him, Burt said.